Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com. Today we're going to make royal icing. As you can see from this sugar cookie, the beauty of royal icing is how it dries to this wonderfully smooth and hard matte finish. And there is a couple ways to make royal icing. One way is with confectioner's sugar, or you may know that as powdered or icing sugar, along with egg whites and lemon juice. And the other way is to make it with confectioner's sugar, meringue powder, and water. Today I'm going to make it with the egg whites and lemon juice. If you want to make it with meringue powder is a really fine white powder that's made of dried egg whites along with sugar. And you can usually buy it in these small tubs. And you can buy it like online, of course, or cake decorating stores or places like Michael's and Joann's. And while I have a recipe on the site for royal icing using this, I would check on the back of the container because each brand tends to have their own recipe on how to make royal icing. So today we're going to use, as I said, the egg whites. I have 2 large, and that's about 60 grams of egg whites. And to that I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. And then I'm just going to take a wire whisk and I'm just going to break up the egg whites. Just give them a quick whisk. And then I'm going to transfer that. If you have a stand mixer like this, use a paddle attachment, or you can easily do this with a hand mixer. And then to that, I'm going to add about 3 cups, which is about 345 grams of confectioner's sugar that has been sifted, because we want to get rid of all those lumps. Now, you can add, I like to add this gradually because you never know. It takes about 3 cups. But what we're making here is royal icing of what you call flooding consistency, which means to cover the surface of either your cookie or a cake. So we want to keep your mixer speed on low speed because we don't want to get a lot of air and then you get all those little air bubbles and then that'll kind of wreck the surface. We want that nice, smooth, hard, matte finish. So I'm just going to start it on like low speed and mix this in, and then I will keep adding sugar. To keep scraping down the sides to ensure that sugar gets mixed in. Now at this point, I have maybe about a cup left of sugar. I kind of check to see the consistency. As you can see, it's still a little too thin. You don't want it running over the sides of the cookie. So I'm going to add a little more. Okay, now the right consistency for flooding, covering the surface, is when I lift my beater here, the icing will drop down onto the top and then slowly dissolve into the rest of the icing, as you can see. Kind of pools on top for a second and then it fades away. Because what you want is when you spread it, it kind of will smooth itself out. There's still enough glide to it. So, now, when you're working with royal icing, always cover it because it dries out very quickly and then you'll get like a thin crust forming on the top and then you have to scrape that off and that. So always cover your icing when not in use. So I've showed you the flooding consistency for the cookie. Now, when I did these sugar cookies, what I did is I piped an edge all the way around. And what that did is, so that when I use the flooding royal icing, it won't spill over the sides. It's kind of like a dike. And I've already made that. And what it is I just used 1 large egg white, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then I used a little more than half of what I would use to make this, about 2 cups of confectioner's sugar. And that can vary, but what you're looking for is a kind of like, I guess, whipped cream or mayonnaise maybe. This is what you're looking for. So I could easily make this one into piping consistently just by keep adding more sugar to it until it gets like this. And what I'm going to do, because as you can see, I've also have these blue dots. So I'm going to take some of this icing and put it in another bowl. Cover that, as I said, and want to dry out. And then I'm going to add some food coloring. Now I like to use these little small bottles. It's kind of a very concentrated paste. The colors are really vivid when you use this. You can buy these again online, cake decorating stores, or again, Joann's and Michael's typically has a large selection of colors. And I'm using this pretty kind of blue. And of course, the more you use, the deeper the color. And use a toothpick, that's a good thing to use to get a little out. And then I'm just going to, you can use a spoon or just, now you want to make sure you really stir this in to get the color evenly distributed. You don't want any streaks of the blue. And if you wanted more color, you could add a little more, but I kind of like that. That's a real nice blue. So what I do for piping is use a piping bag, and what I have is just a very small plain tip. These are disposable bags, which are ideal because royal icing is kind of messy to work with. And what I like to do is have a glass, and at the bottom of the glass what I put is just paper towel that I've just kind of got damp, because that way you don't want, like I said, you don't want royal icing to be exposed to the air for very long. So if I sit this on the wet or damp paper towel, that'll keep it from forming a crust on the bottom of your tip. So I'm just going to, and if you make it easy, put your piping bag in your glass, open it up there, and then just pour it in. Like so. And then make sure you, sometimes if you're going to let this sit a long time, you want to fold it down, or sometimes what I do is just put like a twist tie around there to keep the air out. So that's what you do. The same thing for the white for the outside border. And then for the piping consistency, or the flooding, what we're going to use, some people do put it in a a piping bag as well. I tend to just pour it in a little bowl. I just like to use a spoon when I'm putting it on the cookies, so have that. Okay, and then I'm just doing a little in there, and I'll cover this up just in case I want to color this icing different colors. I'll just keep that aside. So what I'm going to do is just clean this all up, and then I'll show you how to cover the sugar cookies with royal icing. So now we'll frost the sugar cookies with royal icing. And once you have it made, you will need piping consistency royal icing, and I've just put it in a piping bag, fit it with a very small tip. And what we're going to do is, as you can see I've done with the others, I'm going to do a border around the outside of the cookie. Just like so. And do that for all of them. And then you need to let that dry. And then what we're going to do is flood the center with more royal icing. But this is a much thinner consistency. As they say, it's a flooding consistency. As you can see, it's quite runny. Now you could put this in a piping bag if you wanted to and pipe it. I just usually have a little spoon here. And so I say we're flooding the entire cookie with the icing. You could color the royal icing if you want. I'm doing snowflakes here, so white seems appropriate. If your icing was too thin, you could add a little more sugar. If it's too thick, add some water. This is one of those things you just got to practice makes perfect. I use the gel paste to color the icing, and you can buy it at cake decorating stores or Michael's, Joann's. Usually have a pretty good selection. Okay. Okay, so if you have any air bubbles, I just kind of pop them, either with the end of a toothpick or your spoon. So these look very nice just as they are, or you could put a little sparkling sugar on the top. Or what I'm going to show you here is just one thing you can do with royal icing. I'm just going to, while your white, you want to do this while the white icing is still wet. Just going to pipe little dots. As you can see, it's starting to already run into the white. And then just drag a toothpick through as much as you want. Make a little starburst here. Use a steady hand for this. Don't want to have too much coffee. You see, you can just kind of have some fun with this. There. Now, once this is done, you need to let these sit for probably, 8 hours, sometimes even overnight, because you want that royal icing to really dry to a matte finish. So a lot of times that takes at least 8 hours. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.